Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Om Shri Hanuma Bhima Madhvantargata Ramakrishna Vedavyasatmaka Lakshmi Hayagrivaya Namaha. Namaskara of Srinivasan Pranesh to all Sajjanas. We are going through a series of discourse under the title Vedas and Unbiased View. We are in the 11th part or 11th episode of this series. So in the previous session, we discussed about how Advaita philosophy or the philosophy of Sri Madhvacharya is fitting with respect to all three means of knowledge: the direct perception, inference, and scriptures or agama, primarily the Vedas, and how other philosophies that does not convey the truth are unfitting with these Pramāṇas. So we took Advaita as example, and we discussed how it is not in line with the Pramāṇas. So we have to always remember the definition of the instruments of knowledge when it comes to direct perception. So it is the defectless contact between the senses and the object of knowledge. Similarly, the defectless reasoning is inference. So we saw three conditions for an inference to qualify. Number one, repeated experience from direct perception, or favoring statements in case it is Vedas. Number two, no contradictory experience to our inference. Number three, no third party involvement. So inference either have to take support from perception or Vedas. In case of Vedas, we need to have favoring statements from Vedas and no contradicting statements. In case of perception, repeated experience and no contradicting experience. Then scriptures, that is the defectless sound or the defectless words, is called agama. So these definitions we always have to remember, and we applied a simple logic, or it is a common sense. So when there are three means of true knowledge and all the three have got the ability to present the truth, then all three means should be aligned, right? In case the truth spoken is beyond the scope of one of these means, then that can be ignored. Otherwise, we cannot ignore. We have to necessarily include that. So when we say Pratyaksha, Anumana, and Agama, all three conveys the truth, and all three have the ability to convey the truth, then all three should be aligned. So we also saw an example of three witnesses in a crime scene where the police can believe that something happened is true only when all three witnesses are aligned. So in cases where something is beyond sensual perception, then that is out of scope of perception. In that case, we have to depend on Vedas and Veda-based inference. Otherwise, for example, when we say the differences in this universe is real, then we perceive that Vedas also say that there are differences, and inference will also qualify this. So all three means will say the truth. Whereas in case of Advaita, perception does not help, because can we show one person who has got Aikya Anubhava and who understood that whatever perceived is Mithya? That is their philosophy, right? Whatever comes to our perception is Mithya. And the soul itself is God. The soul realizing the oneness with God, that is the Aikya, is their moksha or liberation. So is there any case in this world to show as an example that so and so had Aikya Anubhava and realized that the world is Mithya. No. Why? Because as per their philosophy, as long as you perceive things, you perceive the differences, then you have got Mithya Jnana. You have not got the real Jnana. The moment you got the real Jnana, that is the Aikya Jnana which they mean, then whatever we perceive vanishes from the eyesight. We cannot perceive anything further. Now, let us take any Advaita, even Adi Shankaracharya who propounded that. So, it is the dharma of a sannyasi that he should get food from others, like he should beg for food from others, from a grahastha, and have it. This is the dharma of a sannyasi. So Sri Shankaracharya got donated the food from others till he was surviving and he was eating it. That means a second entity other than him was perceived by him. He took classes to his disciples. That means the disciples were perceived by him. So, even the propounder of the Advaita philosophy himself was not successful in Aikya Anubhava, and he was perceiving things. That means he himself had Mithya Jnana till end. So, when somebody who propounded a philosophy itself was not successful in that philosophy, then how can somebody accept that as a truth and keep following it? So that way, what I'm trying to say is, from our experience in this world, so we cannot show anybody who has got Aikya Anubhava, because in case somebody has got Aikya Anubhava, then a second entity should not have been perceived by them. Even in Madhva Vijaya, before Sri Madhvacharya, that is his guru named Sri Achyuta Preksha, he studied Advaita for several years under his preceptor. So when his preceptor was about to expire, he gave Achyuta Preksha a death statement. A death statement is very, very important actually. Even as per law, that is straight away considered as evidence and truth. On the deathbed, he gave a death statement to his disciple that nobody has got such Aikya Anubhava in this world. He followed Advaita for several years and practiced it very sincerely, but he himself has not got any Aikya Anubhava, and others also has not got any Aikya Anubhava. It is seen that others also have not got any Aikya Anubhava. So he asked Achyuta Preksha to forget whatever he taught on Advaita for several years, and he asked him to go and stay in Ananteshwara temple, so he will get a good path. Then when Achyuta Preksha stayed in Ananteshwara temple, he was praying Ananteshwara, and he came to know from Ananteshwara that he will get a disciple who will clarify all his doubts and show the right philosophy, and that was Sri Madhvacharya. So this way, we can say that Aikya Anubhava and realizing that whatever is perceived is Mithya is not seen in this world actually. We cannot give any such reference. And Advaitins say, like a dream. So somebody is in a dream. So when he wakes up, he realizes that he was in illusion. That is the dream. So similarly, we are in this life now, conscious life. And when everything gets vanished, that means when we stop perceiving this and when we attain Aikya Anubhava, then we realize, similar to a dream, that this life is also not reality, or it is Mithya or Anirochaniya. In this case, in first place, we already talked about the dream, We also talked about Sandhyadikarana from Brahma Sutras. We discussed in brief that the dream state is also true. So citing a dream as an example to prove that the conscious state is also mithya is not right in first place. Second place. So second thing, when it is a dream, how do we know it is a dream? So we dream something, we sense some danger in the dream or something, say for example. So we suddenly wake up, then somebody else near us says, did you have a dream? Or we ourselves have the traces of memory of what we saw in the dream. So we know that we dreamt. We had a dream. We know that ourselves, because when we wake up from the dream to the conscious state, we have the traces of memory of what has been seen in the dream, and we realize it is dream. But in real conscious state, they say it is mithya, it is not reality. But in the conscious state, from the conscious state, when somebody gets aikya jnana, then there is no evidence that they perceived something and that is mithya, because only when this mithya jnana goes away, when it vanishes, somebody gets aikya anubhava, right? And when somebody gets aikya anubhava, he stops perceiving things. All these what we perceive is because of the nescience or ignorance. That is their philosophy. So only when this ignorance is gone, somebody can have aikya anubhava. So somebody, when they have aikya anubhava, they no more even remember what they perceived. Then how can you come to the conclusion that what had been perceived so far is mithya? There is no such evidence. In dream state, whoever perceived the dream actually is aware that what he perceived were dream objects. But in the conscious state, there is no such evidence also. There is only one entity present, and he himself is God. So there is no second entity to come and say that whatever you perceived so far is mithya and you have aikya jnana. No. There is no second entity to be the witness. And the self, he no more has mithya jnana, because if he has the memory of mithya jnana, that whatever he perceived so far was mithya, then it means he has got mithya jnana. There is no aikya jnana. So when aikya jnana comes, mithya jnana totally vanishes. Then without any proper evidence, how can we come to a conclusion that whatever has been perceived so far is mithya? So perception no way helps Advaita, and they give some example from perception to prove their inference that whatever is perceived is mithya. So they give example of silver and seashell, but we already went through that it is 1 in 1 lakh case. There is no, based on silver and seashell, just one case. If we proceed to say that whatever we perceive is superimposed, whatever we perceive is mithya, then every perception should be of similar superimposed experience, similar kind. But we don't get such repeated experience. This is 1 in 1 lakh case, we can say. When we perceive a pot, when we perceive cloth, when we perceive a bed, when we perceive laptop, when we perceive a human, we have clear cognition, we have clear perception. So that means there is no repeated experience which supports the Advaitins. There is no contradicting, there is contradicting experience which fails their inference. So that way, their inference is not supported by pratyaksha. Now what they do? Because the perception is a weak evidence, weak reference for them, they proceed to take support from Vedas. As we went through already, if there are 3 means which can convey the truth, then all 3 should be aligned. When perception has ability to present us the truth, so ignoring the perception and taking support from the other two will only cause doubt whether what is known is truth or not. We cannot come to any conclusion from that because all three means of truth are not aligned. In case of Dvaita Vedanta, we saw that all three were aligned, all three are aligned. In case of Advaita, we are discussing that all three are not supporting. So perception is not supporting in first place. To prove that Advaita Paksha is true, then they proceed to Vedas. So among the infinite Vedas, they pick very few statements and they say like Tatvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, like this. They pick few statements to prove that the self is God, and but that can be interpreted in different ways. Now, when it comes to Vedas, if they can show some evidence from Vedas that support their inference, then there are also statements from Vedas which clearly state the difference, which clearly says God and soul are different. God is independent and soul is dependent. The world, created world, the universe is real. The differences are real. So all such evidences can be produced from the Vedas itself. So now, how Advaita can take support from Vedas? Because there are contradicting statements from Vedas which fail their inference. So, if Advaitin says Vedas speak about Aikya, then others can very well show Veda Shrutis, the Shrutis that show the differences and reality of this world from the Vedas. So the disparate Advaiti, what he does, he divides the Vedas into Tattva Vedaka and Atattva Vedaka. That is the only way by which he can come out, he can escape and prove his inference. See, the very problem that we see here is the philosophy is to connect the life and the real-time experience with the Vedas. If you take support from Vedas to say that whatever experience you have is all mithya, then that is not right. The Vedas should explain it should get connected with our real life, our experiences. Only then we can have trust in Vedas and we can get convinced with the Vedas. So there are Advaita Shruti, what Advaitin calls as Advaita Shruti, but that can be interpreted in a different way. I will come to that later. So Advaitin divides the Vedas into Tattva Vedaka and Atattva Vedaka. So in first place, Vedas should connect to the real-time life, and that is the role of the philosophy. The philosophy is not here to say that there is no connection between what you perceive and the Vedas. They are entirely different, and whatever you perceive is mithya. That is not the purpose of philosophy. For example, when I perceive a pot and you quote something from Vedas and say that what you are perceiving is not a pot, then I'm not going to trust Vedas in that case, right? Because my experience, what it says to me, that comes first. That is of the prime importance. And Vedas should get aligned with this. It should get connected with this. It cannot go in a separate track and just to say that whatever we perceive is mithya. That is not right. However, the perception does not support the inference of Advaitin. So now he picks support from Vedas. Even in Vedas, the opponents show the contradicting statements. So somehow the purpose of philosophy is to explain us the Vedas. But what the philosophers have done, I don't mean Dvaita, but the other philosophies, what they have done is, especially the philosophies like Advaita, they inferred something and they try to somehow bend the Vedas and somehow prove that their inference is correct. They are doing it vice versa. We should not say something blindly and try to prove that the Pramāṇas says this only. We should say something in line with the Pramāṇas. We should explain what is in the Vedas. We should not say something and try to prove that Vedas say the same thing. That is not right. And that is what the Advaitin is doing. So somehow, to take support from Vedas, to avoid these Veda Shrutis, they clearly divide Vedas into two. That is as Tattva Vedaka and Atattva Vedaka. So Tattva Vedaka, they say Tattva Vedaka means so whatever is philosophical, whatever is the essence of Vedas that one should know. That is these Aikya Vakyas which say that self is God and whatever we perceive is mithya. So that they picked some statements, they misinterpreted it. They picked some statements and produced that as evidence from Vedas. And wherever the Veda comes, wherever the Vedas says difference is real, the soul and God are different, they can never become one, and the world that is created is real. So wherever such evidences come from Vedas, they reject it, saying Atattva Vedaka. That means that is not of philosophical importance. So now see the situation. Imagine the situation that the Vedas are infinite in numbers, and they pick very few statements or few words from the Vedas. They label it as Tattva Vedaka, and whatever is not in favor of them, major things are not in favor of them, and they label everything as Atattva Vedaka and reject it, saying that that does not have any philosophical importance. Such division is not seen in Vedas. It is the it is how Advaitins propounded it to favor their side, to somehow prove their side that they are correct and what they speak is the truth. So now, such a division will backfire the Advaitins. You may ask how. I already told that several philosophies originated in India, Bharata Desha. So even for Vedavyasa, there were other Purva Paksha philosophies. I said Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Purva Mimamsa, Uttara Mimamsa, or the so-called Vedanta, which is given by Vedavyasa Deva. All these 6 philosophies believe in Vedas. And other 3, Buddhism, Jainism, and Charvaka, are the materialists. They don't believe in Vedas. Under Vedavyasa Deva, for Brahma Sutras, 22 people have given bhashyas, commentaries, and 22nd is Madhvacharya. 22nd doesn't mean that that came at the last. All philosophies are eternal. Madhva philosophy was also eternal, but that has been forgotten because of the Kali Pravaha. Because in Krita Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, the past 3 yugas, the knowledge of people were in such a way that they didn't need a support of anything from outside to understand the Vedas or epics, Puranas. Just on reading that, they got the right knowledge, the true knowledge from that. So when we entered into Kali Yuga, then because of the curse of Gautama Maharishi, because of Kali Pravaha, so people started forgetting things. So all false philosophies started coming in. So Sri Madhvacharya had to incarnate and re-establish the forgotten Madhva philosophy. So that is how it is 22nd and 21 becomes the Purva Paksha. That doesn't mean that Sri Madhvacharya himself created a new philosophy and gave it to people. Whatever had been forgotten, that has been re-established by Sri Madhvacharya, that so and so is the true knowledge and rest are not true. So that way, now there are 6 main philosophies, including that of Vedavyasa Deva, which believes in Vedas but have different interpretations, even mutually contradicting interpretations. And even below Sri Vedavyasa Deva, it is branched into 22. Similarly, other philosophies also have several branches. Now, all these people believe in Vedas. They give their philosophies based on Vedas. However, they mutually contradicting in so many places and do not agree with each other. Now, if the Advaitin takes a stand that very few portion of the Vedas can be classified as that has got philosophical importance, and the rest all can be discarded, saying that those are not of philosophical importance, then every philosophy, the several philosophies that mutually contradict with each other but believe in Vedas, will take the similar stand, and they will pick few words from Vedas. They will say these things are philosophically important from Vedas, which favors my philosophy, and any evidence that the opponent produce, they will reject it, saying that it is not of philosophical importance without any basis. There is no basis. How do you say that something is of philosophical importance, something is not of philosophical importance? There should be a basic, there should be a logic. You cannot say that whatever is favoring me is philosophically important, right? So if Advaitin takes such a stand, then all the opponents of the Advaitins may take a similar stand, that whatever is favoring them is of philosophical importance from Vedas, and whatever is not favoring their philosophy can be discarded. So in this case, how can Advaitin first prove his philosophy? How can he establish his philosophy to his opponents? So there, dividing the Vedas like this will only backfire the Advaitins or anybody who gets into such act, and this is not going to give any conclusive results. Actually, it is like cutting the Vedas as a means of pramana at its root. It's just an act of making the Vedas invalid as a pramana, because that will only result in a situation where you cannot arrive at any conclusion from Vedas, and Vedas will lose its validity. That is what Advaitin has done. So I hope we will realize what kind of mistake has been done by Advaitins by dividing the Vedas into two like this. That is something that is of philosophical importance, and something that is not of philosophical importance and can be discarded. So, as Madhva philosophy says, if you want to take support from Vedas as pramana, then in first place, one has to accept the Vedas in whole as pramanas. You cannot divide it, partly accepting something, partly not accepting something, and saying that whatever you accepted is favoring your philosophy. This is not right. This is only backfire. This will only backfire and does not lead to any kind of conclusion. So, in first place, if Vedas are to be taken as pramana, then Vedas as whole should be accepted as pramana. Each and every word in the Veda should be accepted as pramana. Now, the Advaitin questions back. Okay, let us say we accept the whole Vedas as Pramana. In that case, you state Veda Shrutis from Vedas, stating that the difference is real, the world is real, soul is real, the difference between soul and God are real. That is fine. Now, I have quoted some Aikya Shrutis like Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, Ekameva Advitiyam, and so on. So now, these statements, the Advaitic statements, Aikya statements, and the Veda statements are contradicting with each other. So if we take the approach of accepting the Vedas as whole, as pramana, then how will you resolve this contradiction? Even in your stand, the Vedas lose its validity, right? Because it will be considered self-contradicting. If there is such an argument, then the Madhva philosophers say, no, there is no contradiction in Vedic statements. That is all the misinterpretation of the interpreter. So Shruti can be taken in two ways. So instead of dividing it as Tattva Vedaka and Atattva Vedaka, you have to consider that as Shavakasha and Niravakasha Shruti. So Savakasha means it can be interpreted in more than one way. There is avakasha. There is a possibility to interpret something in more than one way. And when we say niravakasha, that means it can be interpreted in only one way. There is no second meaning for that at all. Now, say for example, if I say that house is in Ganga, that means Everybody knows that the house cannot be in the running water. So people take a different meaning. They understand that as the house should be on the banks of the river. So here, different meaning is possible. This is not the exact example. Means Savakasha means, now for example, if I say Aikya, then that can be understood in two ways. So either it is direct Aikya, straight merger with one another, where two entities merge and become one entity. And there are also other ways like Chintana Aikya or Mati Aikya. We can interpret that way, that we are aligned in thoughts. And Sthana Aikya, that means several entities are in the same space. So such meanings can also be made. So that is Savakasha. That means it can give more than one meaning. Whereas Niravakasha means, Savakasha means it gives several meanings. Niravakasha means there is only one meaning. Say for example, I say that fish is in Ganga. Then you cannot interpret it in other ways at all, because the fish should be directly in the water. If you put it on the banks, then it will die. So you cannot interpret in other ways. It necessarily have to be in water, and that one meaning only can be taken. You cannot interpret it in the second way at all. Now Veda Shruti, let us take the Veda Shrutis. When Vedas clearly say God and soul are dependent or different. God is independent, soul is dependent on God. So all these statements have to be taken in one meaning only. When Vedas clearly state difference, how can you take that as Aikya? How can you interpret that as Aikya? That becomes Niravakasa Shruti, where interpretation of meanings more than one is not possible at all. That is why Advaitin discarded this, saying it is not of philosophical importance, because they know if they admit, they cannot give a second meaning to it. Differences cannot be interpreted as Aikya, but Aikya can be interpreted as giving differences yet. So all Aikya Shruti or Savakasha Shruti, that means whatever Advaitin quotes from Vedas, that can be interpreted in several ways. And whatever Madhva philosophers quote from the Vedas, that gives the differences, that says differences are real, and whatever the Madhva philosophy concepts or principles are, so those statements from Vedas opposing Advaitins are all Niravakasha. That means it can be interpreted only in one way, and a second meaning is not possible at all. So to resolve this contradiction, you have to fix the Niravakasha. That means whatever Vedic statements that can be literally or straight away interpreted only in one way, that has to be fixed. And whatever is Savakasha, that means which can be interpreted is in more than one way, in several ways, that has to be interpreted in a way that it is aligned with this Niravakasha Shruti, so that the contradiction will be resolved. And that is logical, right? Is it convincing or not? When something can be interpreted in more than two or three ways, so what's wrong in interpreting it in a different way? So you have to interpret in a way that it gets aligned with the Niravakasha Shruti, where more than one meaning is not possible at all, so the contradiction gets resolved. In Yukti Mallika, Sri Vadiraja Tirtharu gives a simple and beautiful example to understand this. So let us say when two cows are fighting with each other, or two bulls are fighting with each other. So how will you stop the fight? It is enough if we just show some grass to one of the cows and divert the cow, so the fight will stop. Instead, the approach taken by Advaiti is, if two cows or two bulls are fighting with each other, then you kill one, so the other one will be separate and the fight will stop. So similar is the approach of Advaitin, where they divide Vedas as some statements giving philosophical meaning and some statement are not important philosophically. It is similar to killing one cow, one portion of Vedas, to stop the fight. So this is not the way to resolve the contradiction. By doing that, it will only backfire to the people who do such classification, and that is not right. So we have to see which Shrutis are Savakasha Shruti, which Shrutis. Shruti means Vedic statements. So which Vedic statements are Niravakasha, and we have to interpret the meaning of Savakasha Shruti to be aligned with the Niravakasha. That is diverting it, not like how we diverted a cow giving the grass to stop the fight. So similarly, if you give the right interpretation so that it gets aligned with the Niravakasha Shruti, then the contradiction gets resolved and the whole Vedas becomes Pramāṇa. So in first place, if you want to accept Vedas as Pramāṇa, or if you want to take support from Vedas for the inference made, then the whole Vedas, each and every word in the Vedas have to be accepted as valid, Pramāṇa. So if we accept the whole Vedas as valid, then some statements seem to be literally contradicting. So how can we resolve that? For that, the Madhva philosopher said it has to be divided into Savakasha Shruti and Niravakasha Shruti. And Savakasha Shruti, where more than one interpretation is possible, the interpretation that is supposed to be aligned with the Niravakasha, where more than one interpretation is not possible. So this gives the alignment and resolves the contradiction. So that way, so Veda Shrutis are Niravakasha. Whatever Madhva philosophers quote, when Vedas clearly state there is a difference, so that cannot be interpreted in other way. It has to be kept as Niravakasha. And whatever the Advaitin quotes are Savakasha. So that has to be interpreted in a different way, not in the way that the Advaitin interpreted it literally. So Mati Aikya, Aikya, let us take the word Aikya for example. So Aikya can be Mati Aikya or Buddhi Aikya. Let us say for example Bhagavata. So we all know the story of Daksha Prajapati. So he had a fight with Rudra, Shiva, and his head was cut, and then he got a goat head to complete the fire ritual that he was conducting, all that we know. So Vishnu, who was present there, he speaks he says that Rudra should not be ignored in a fire ritual. Shiva should not be ignored in a fire ritual. In this regard, Brahma, myself, and Shiva, all three have the same opinion or the same thought. So he says, Trayanam Eka Bhavanam. All three has got the same opinion or the same thought. So does this mean Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, everybody got Aikya and all three entities has become one entity and there is no second one at all? No, such interpretation cannot be made at all. There is Aikya. There is Aikya in the thoughts at the thoughts level. Similarly, let us say 1 lakh people assembled in a place. We say that is the Aikya of 1 lakh people. So that is called Sthana Aikya or Sthala Aikya. So here, does that mean all 1 lakh people merged with each other and they all attained Aikya and became just one human being? No, such an interpretation is not practical, not possible at all, right? So that is a Sthana Aikya or Sthala Aikya. That means in a given space, so many entities, they get united, they stand together. So this is called Sthana Aikya. So like this, Aikya can be interpreted in several ways, but the Vedic statements that give the differences clearly, that cannot be interpreted in a second way. That has to be necessarily interpreted only in one way. So if you feel Aikya Shrutis are contradicting with the Veda Shrutis, then Aikya Shrutis, which are Savakasha, have to be interpreted to be aligned with the Niravakasha Shruti. So even in this manner, Veda becomes Satya. That is, Veda is proved to be true. And Aikya, as understood by Advaitin, is untrue. And similarly, in Grantha like Vishnu Tattva Vinirnaya, Sri Madhvacharya himself quotes directly from Vedas, from Paramashruti, so which clearly says that Aikya have to be interpreted in a different way, like Buddhi Aikya, and it cannot be the Swarupa Aikya. That means it is not the Aikya between the God and the soul. It is the Aikya at the level of thoughts or something. So we have to interpret in a different way. And the Vedas clearly say that God is Purna, that is, He is complete, full, and He is absolutely independent, whereas the souls are Alpa, they are Apurna, they are Alpa, and they are dependent on God completely. So the merger between the God and the soul, or the Aikya as interpreted by Advaitin, is not possible at all. So such a direct statement is given from Vedas by Sri Madhvacharya in his work. So when Vedas directly say that God and the soul are different, they can never attain Aikya, and the Aikya should be understood in a different manner. So when the Vedas themselves say such things, then how the Advaitin can pick very few statements from Vedas and say that Aikya means realizing the self is God, and everything else becomes Mithya. So that is not a right interpretation. So no way the inference of Advaitin is supported by Pratyaksha or by Vedas. So by all three means of knowledge, it can be proven that Advaita philosophy is not right. Whereas when it comes to Madhva philosophy, all three support the Madhva philosophy principles, because we say about differences. So we see difference, we perceive the differences really. Vedas also says that difference or real, the world is real. All Madhva philosophical principles are clearly stated in the Vedas. So if in case Advaitin speaks about the contradiction between the Shrutis that they quote and what the Madhva Siddhānta Vadins take, then it has to be seen from the perspective of Savakasha Shruti and Niravakasha Shruti to resolve the contradiction. And in first place, Vedas should be accepted as whole as Pramāṇas. Only then Vedas can be used as a Pramāṇa. Otherwise, Vedas will become unfit as Pramāṇa, and it will only backfire. So the Advaitin says he also believes in Pratyaksha, Anumana, and Agama. However, what they do is, instead of saying the truth based on these Pramāṇas, they infer something and try to prove that these means of knowledge are aligned with them. But that is not at all possible when we proceed to present the truth, because it will clearly become evident on a little analysis and applying a common sense and common logic that a philosophy fails by all three means of knowledge. And whereas it comes to the Dvaita Siddhānta, all three qualifies. So why I took this topic and discussed between Advaita and Dvaita is, in first place, we questioned why we spoke about Pratyaksha Anumana. Our topic is Vedas. So why we spoke so much on Pratyaksha Anumana? We said that Pratyaksha Anumana are also as equally important as Vedas. So all three should be there. So when all three can present some truth, when all three means have the ability to present the truth, and we have to include all three in the analysis, and all three should be aligned, only then what is spoken by these three means of knowledge is truth. We say these three means of knowledge is to know the truth. In that case, all three should be aligned. So to explain it further, we picked two cases. One is the Dvaita Vedanta, one is the Dvaita philosophy, and the other one is Advaita philosophy. And we showed when we analyze the philosophical concepts with respect to the Pramāṇas, then how Advaita is unfitting and how Dvaita is fitting. And we can never say that all philosophies are correct, because that we already reviewed it several times. We had spoken about that in our very first part. So when there are mutually contradicting statements or opinions, both or all such statements cannot be true. Only one has to be necessarily true. So we had a support from Bhagavad Gita also for that. So now to realize which is true and which is not true, then we essentially need to possess the knowledge of these Pramāṇas, and we have to analyze the philosophical concepts with respect to the Pramāṇas, and then come to a conclusion on which one is true and which one is not true. So with this, let us conclude this part 11. So in another 2 or 3 parts, let us go through the Pramāṇas, because we said that we have put a word defectless in every definition. That means some defects are also possible. So let us go through what are the defects, possible defects in each means of knowledge, and then we will get into the debates on the Vedas as authority, on the eternity of Vedas. So that is the real topic, Vedas and unbiased view. I won't say whatever we discussed so far is unnecessary. So we laid a foundation on how to proceed, because when we get into the debates on Vedas, we will repeatedly hear these words like Pratyaksha, Anumana. So we cannot keep on explaining every time when we follow the debates between various philosophies, when we discuss on the glory of Vedas and its eternity and authority. So these foundational episodes, the initial 13 or 14 episodes should be listened, and whatever concepts have been discussed so far should be kept in the memory, so that the further episodes can be easily followed and understood. So with that, let me conclude this part 11 of this series, and we'll meet you again in the episode 12. Thank you. Sarvam Sri Krishna Arpanamastu.